Colby's Phi Beta Kappa charter was originated in 1896. In that year, and in every year since, the Colby Phi Beta Kappa chapter has elected to membership students distinguished for their outstanding achievements in the liberal arts and sciences. We also work in other ways to encourage scholarly excellence here at Colby. For example, we sponsor annual academic achievement awards that go to the top 2 sophomores and top 2 juniors every fall. In honor and memory of Charles and Carol Bassett, who were beloved professors at Colby and active Phi Beta Kappans, we have regularly made contributions to Colby libraries to fund the purchase of books and other scholarly resources. This year, we've created funding opportunities to support scholarly activities at Colby during the summer and funded students to attend professional conferences in their disciplines. And in this, its second year, we are very pleased to host this speech contest at the Colby Liberal Arts Symposium. This year's topic is, to what outcomes should liberal arts colleges aspire for its students? A preliminary round of competition was held over the last few weeks. Each contestant was asked to speak twice to a few different evaluators. The committee, all of those who saw these speeches, were overwhelmed by the quality and depth of all of these student participants' speeches. Alas, today we have time for but 6. So we've selected the 6 best. They are, in the order in which they will be presenting, Claire Muscat, class of 2017. Darpan Roy Chowdhury, class of 2017. Jeb Waters, class of 2015. Alexa Busser, class of 2017. Precious Hunt, class of 2017. Class of 2017 is well represented on this, yes. And finally, last but not least, Liam Connell, class of 2015. Okay. So just a quick note on the evaluation. So at the conclusion of each speech, with a thumbs up from Professor Nick Bucklehide, who's running our tech today, we will ask those with clickers to vote on a scale of 1 to 10. However, 10 is the number 0 on your clickers. So if you dislike somebody, please select not 0 but 1, and if you like them, as I'm sure you will, all 6 of them, 0 would be the appropriate answer. However, given that we are asking you to evaluate each speech at its conclusion, we ask that you be cautious about how delivering scores for the first 1 or 2, recognizing that you are not yet aware of the depth of all 6 speeches. So be aware if you jump right in with a 9 or 10 for Claire, as I'm sure she'll deserve, that would represent the ceiling. So just be aware of that with your clickers. So, and at the conclusion of this competition, as we are collecting data at real time, I'll be very happy to announce our second and first runners-up as well as our contest winner. So without further ado, let us get started with Claire Muscat.
Hello to everyone I've ever met at Colby. Hi, President Green. Okay. Again, I'm Claire Muscat. I'm in the class of 2017. When I told my father about my plan to major in classics and theater and dance, he was thrilled. This may come as a shock to most of you, considering especially that both my parents are physicians, a neurologist and a psychiatrist to be exact. I will leave it to your imagination to decide what that was like growing up. Anyway, I think he was relieved I had actually decided on something. I came to Colby after a much-needed year off, which I took for a large part because I felt completely lost on what I wanted to study. So, while my peers all left for their freshman orientations, I made plans to travel and set for myself the low expectation goal of finding my true self and passion in life. Needless to say, that didn't happen, and I nevertheless came to Colby just as clueless about what I wanted to pursue academically. Although I had hoped it would just click into place, I more or less stumbled, unromantically, onto both of my majors. I took ancient Greek history my freshman fall with Yossi Roizman, and because I had always enjoyed ancient history well enough, and most importantly, it took care of both the literature and international diversity requirements. I ended up really loving the material and even had fun writing my first research paper, Hysteria and the Wandering Womb in Classical Greece. As for theater, I auditioned for a powder and wig show and ended up being cast. And I took an acting class, Inspired, and one thing led to another. And when the time came to declare, I thought to myself, why the hell not for the classics and theater? That's a rhetorical question. To be brutally honest, I'm sometimes embarrassed, even at Colby, to tell people about my major. It comes out like an admittance, and even then I feel like I have to qualify it. I usually follow right away with a self-deprecating, oh, I'm gonna be super employable. So if their polite smile is in fact hiding a judgmental, what is she gonna do with that? At least I can be the first one to admit it. We always talk about doing something with our majors. What am I gonna do with a classics major? As Dr. Catherine Brooks, Director of Liberal Arts Career Services at the University of Texas at Austin puts it, your major is not a hammer. You're not going to do anything with it. Your major is a body of knowledge, a way of thinking, the mindsets and skills you have acquired. The entire article is actually about how much one can do with a classics major, and yes, I read it to myself every night before I go to sleep. In all seriousness, though, I think her words really do ring true. A degree in the liberal arts is not only the sum of its parts, the accumulation of 10 or so classes in a major, along with supplemental core classes that give sort of a background in a few random subjects. It is the ability to think critically and use that critical thinking for problem solving or even interactions with the world at large. So maybe there isn't a tangible or quantifiable outcome that a liberal arts school can aspire to for its students. Rather, a cultivated mind is the best outcome that I think a school like Colby can give us. So a liberal arts school should, as Colby does, aspire for its students to synthesize the information they are given rather than just passively absorb it, to prompt its student to study not just for success in the workforce, but for an open and analytic mind that is in the end imperative for success in the workforce. In a world full of increasingly antithetical political and social ideologies, we need citizens who are willing to view issues as multifaceted wholes rather than just disorganized parts, and can use their interdisciplinary skills to solve these problems effectively and, most importantly, with compassion. They say a theater degree won't do me any good in the real world, but I can tell you that in my theater classes, I've learned about philosophy from Camus plays, about social activism from the theater of the oppressed, about political ideologies from the study of theater in its historical context. I have learned more about human nature in the study of myth than I have ever expected, and translating lines of Xenophon is like doing an ancient Greek logic puzzle. So yes, maybe when taken piece by piece, these little bits of information may not seem helpful for the real world, but when synthesized, the sum of these parts are what will make me an individual who is informed enough to want to and be able to make a positive impact in the world. I won't stand here and pretend like I never questioned my choice of majors. But what I try to never forget is that at the end of my 4 years at Colby, because I have had the privilege to earn a liberal arts degree, I will be equipped with an open, curious, questioning, critically thinking, and analytic mind that will be an asset to myriad career options in a career spanning from law to business to academia to performance. So starting now, I reject any remarks about the frivolity of acting classes, about the uselessness of learning ancient Greek, or my inevitable homelessness. And I will embrace every bit of knowledge I can and use once I leave Colby. Thank you.
Wonderful. Before we open voting, if there are other members of Phi Beta Kappa who've wandered into our audience, please raise your hand, and Professor Sheddick, I will run a clicker to you. Is there anyone who does not have one who'd like a clicker? All right. So again, are we ready to? We are ready to open. Voting is open. 0 is 10, 1 through 9 otherwise. Highest is 0. There's a metaphor in there somewhere. Yeah, okay.
Remember, 0 is 10.
Okay. Next, we shall close voting. Okay, next, Darpan Roy Chowdhury.
Thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start my speech by just laying out a couple of things. Firstly, that we're talking about the outcomes that a liberal arts education and not a degree could guarantee you. So I'm just going to leave careers and jobs and things like that out of this, leading to my second point, which is that I don't think that the outcomes we're evaluating today can be put into numbers. I don't think that they can be quantified. In fact, I don't even think they're defined, to be honest. So I won't bother you with statistics. I have one statistic, though. I'd like to get it out of the way before we move on. It's very important, so listen closely. 1 in every 7 Americans has over 10 credit cards. Now, this has nothing to do with today's topic. This is just a lesson I learned at the liberal arts education. I guarantee you, no day will I have more than 10 credit cards. But what I'm trying to say is that what we're trying to measure today as liberal arts outcomes can be measured only in terms of perspective, only in terms of things that cannot really be put together, things that you can't get your finger on. But at the same time, there's a secret weapon to this liberal arts education, and that secret weapon is freedom. Being in a system where you're allowed to choose what you believe, what you want to study, what applies to you, what this world is made up of, that is the secret weapon, according to me, with regards to the liberal arts education. Now, I'd like to share a short story with you. It's from the Hindu epic, the Mahabharata. There was this young boy, this tribal child called Eklavya, who wanted to learn how to be an archer. All he wanted to do was learn how to shoot arrows. And there's this, this great legendary professor of archery called Drona. And Eklavya went to him and he said, "Sir, look, I have nothing. I have no parents, no family. All I want to do is learn how to be an archer, and you're the best, so please teach me." Drona said, "I'm sorry, son. You know, I'm too busy teaching princes and kings to bother with a tribal boy." So Eklavya says, "Sir, I'll give you anything." It's called Guru Dakshina, which is a gift to your teacher, technically. He says, "I'll give you anything for Guru Dakshina." And Drona says, knowing fully well that Eklavya couldn't arch without his thumb, he says, "Cut off your thumb and give it to me." And Eklavya just rips his thumb right off and gives it to him, and then goes on to become a legendary archer. President Green, don't get any ideas. I'm not cutting my thumb off for you yet. But what I'm trying to say is that education is about being present, about being aware, about learning about the movements that are around you, the people that are around you, the things that make up your world. And that's what I believe is the central key point to a liberal arts education, to learn how to be aware. The outcome is not your job or your profession. The outcome is yourself, and to what extent you can push yourself and see your limits and see the world that is around you. I'd like to pose an example to better explain my point. Hans Zimmer, probably the greatest contemporary music composer we've seen. He's composed music for over 150 films, endless scores. He, as a child, said that his mother was a classical pianist and his dad was an inventor. So he used to take his piano and do things like attach chainsaws to it to create new sounds. Now, his mother thought this was blasphemy because she was a classical pianist. His father loved it. He was an inventor. But the point is that if you can have the confidence and the perspective to put things like that together and create something that has never been done before, you are virtually seeing the future. And the only way you can do that is if your mind is in an environment where it's allowed to roam freely, where it's allowed to explore, it's allowed to discover. And that's what Hans Zimmer did. And that's what I believe that a liberal arts education should push you towards. This one semester at Colby, I took ancient Greek philosophy, single variable calculus, political theory, all at the same time. And I can't explain how big of an event that was for me in terms of broadening my horizons, helping me see the world differently. Thousands of years, different cultures, all of that at the same time, and being able to see it, being able to process it, being able to put myself in there was, I think, one of the greatest, absolute greatest moments I've had at Colby. I'd like to conduct an experiment. Could everyone present here who considers them to be my friend, could you raise your hands? I'm not talking about people who see me on the weekend and be like, "Oh, there's a brown kid." You know, but okay, so there's an overwhelming majority of white people, as everything else in Maine, but At the same time, there's Koreans and Africans and Latin Americans and Europeans. And what I'm trying to say is that even dinner time conversation with these people is impeccably diverse. And these are things that the liberal arts education forces you to notice. To conclude, I'd like to honor a dear friend who we lost very recently, Peter Cronkite. May his soul rest in peace. Peter taught me that sometimes things are not how they seem, that you have to look further, try to understand. He had a code. He was a man who lived by a code that not many people could see, but his code was humor. And I always saw that in him. He was the funniest man in the room, and he didn't care what he said as long as it was funny. It was a joke. And you had to get that to understand Peter Cronkite. And my liberal arts education forced me to see that people like Peter had beautiful hearts and ingenious minds, but that they could go about things a little differently than you. So thank you, Peter. Thank you, this liberal arts education, for giving me the opportunity to be in a position where I am forced to change my views about the world, where my mind is blown on a constant basis every day, just so I have to readjust and carry on. This, I believe, is the greatest outcome anything can ever give you, the freedom of thought and the confidence to pursue what you want. And that, I believe, is what a liberal arts education should aspire to. Thank you.
Voting is now open. Four, three, two, one, and voting is now closed. Our next speaker, Jeb Waters.
Thank you. As you all know, my name is Jeb Waters. Colleges can only highly serve us when they aim not to drill, but to create and set the hearts of their youth on flame. That might just sound like another quote to begin another speech, but let me repeat it. Colleges can only highly serve us when they aim not to drill, but to create and set the hearts of their youth on flame. At least, that's what Ralph Waldo Emerson said in a speech to the Phi Beta Kappa Society in 1837. The speech was entitled The American Scholar and would soon become the Society's literary magazine. But we're here to discuss outcomes for a liberal arts college, not to have a history lesson in the liberal arts. I think we can all agree that Emerson's statements ring true, that a college should seek to give its students the ability to create, the ability to be inspired, and not just drill them. And yet at the same time, the very question we're here to discuss is outcomes, whether jobs, graduate admissions, or fellowships. We have these seemingly immeasurable ideals on one hand, and yet we have, on the other hand, the need to objectively measure ourselves consistently. And Colby is not alone in this. And each individual in this room is not alone in this. Everyone needs this. So while it's great to hear from intellectual A to intellectual Fareed Zakaria that the students are learning to think critically, the students also need jobs. While the outcome appears to either focus on teaching critical thinking skills or to focus instead on getting us jobs, perhaps this is not the case. Perhaps it is not statistics or learning the classics. Unfortunately, for the sake of the media, for the sake of the parents of the kids applying to Colby and the college's rankings, it is improbable, too idealistic, and too difficult to cast off all numbers and imagine that we're just a Montessori school. The outcome that we keep hoping liberal arts colleges will aspire to is one that cannot necessarily be measured in the near term. We dream of these lofty ideals, but it's difficult to measure because you can't measure those kinds of things with statistics. However, you can measure admissions. You can measure the amount of kids going to work in bulge bracket banks each year. Those statistics are nice, clear, and they give you an idea of just how we're doing. It seems confusing, but fortunately, the solution is not necessarily black and white. Instead, by developing an environment that allows students to have their hearts set on flame and then get a job afterwards, we can remove this either-or distinction. We can aim for the correct outcome. Of course, this begs the question, what kind of environment can erase that binary opposition? First, I do not mean to dissuade a school from accepting 2,400 students who will major in biochem, or that we should get rid of econ majors that are going to work in bulge bracket banks. But I do mean a college should seek to find the kids that are different, that are a little bit lost, that are extremely smart, write witty essays. Find those kids, throw them into the same environment with these biochem majors, with these econ majors, and then give them a body of knowledge so they can build and create a successful and inventive life. Once the students are in this environment, offer them a breadth of options, just as Colby does. Jan plan, study abroad, exposure to learning outside of the classroom. This means that it should come to no surprise that a physics major is an athlete, that a chem major is an improv, or that a philosophy major is taking corporate finance, even if he literally gets a C on every single exam. Such an environment will produce a cross-pollination of ideas, skills, and most importantly, a diverse and healthy community. Students will still have the necessary skills to get jobs, and because they have developed skills that cannot be measured, creativity, learning how to fail, teamwork, they will do more than get a job. They will flourish. Instead of focusing on just the outcome of getting a job, or even worse, focusing on the outcome of not understanding anything outside of a classroom, the means begin to blend with the ends. The outcome still includes getting jobs, but the outcome begins at admissions processes. The outcome begins in creating the environment that leads to the jobs. And these students will do more than just get jobs. They might even land themselves on the notable alumni page of Colby College's Wikipedia. And that would be fantastic. Perhaps you're agreeing with me at this point, but wondering how can we do one or the other? Well, I would like to suggest that the outcome is not an either-or question, but a both-and question. Of course, that might sound like Professor Bryant about to go on a tangent in English theory class, and it is. But it's also a practical solution. We need to remove the logical inconsistencies of the either-or solution and turn it into a both-and. It's exactly the point. We need to do it. So, to conclude, in an essay on startup ideas, the venture capitalist and Y Combinator founder, Paul Graham, quotes Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, saying, "You want to know how to paint a perfect painting? It's easy. Make yourself perfect, and then just paint naturally." It's easy. Make yourself perfect, and then just paint naturally. He then follows up that quote by saying, empirically, the way to have good startup ideas is to become the sort of person who has them. I'll repeat that again, the sort of person who has them. Thus, the outcome a liberal arts college should aspire to for its students is to become the type of place that allows students to become the type of people that can be successful both measurably and immeasurably. The type of place that sets the hearts of our youth on flame so we can go out into the world and paint perfect paintings. Thank you.
Voting is now open. Four, three, two, one, and voting is now closed. Our next speaker, Alexa Busser.
Hello. All right, so before you all have to listen to me, I have a question for you. How many of you knew or thought you knew what you wanted to be when you grew up when you were 5 years old? Yeah, me too. I was either going to be the president or a marine biologist. How many of you know right now, for sure, or adults in the room, how many of you thought you knew when you were 18 what you wanted to be? Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, I have no idea. And it seems that the closer the future gets, the more tangible it becomes, the more it seems to slip through my fingers. But we're not alone in this uncertainty. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average tenure at a job right now is about 4.3 years. That amounts to more than 10 jobs in our lifetimes. No wonder we don't know what we want to do. We're not going to do one thing. We're going to do so many different things. So liberal arts institutions really need to prepare us for anything. They need to prepare us for any job, and maybe even the apocalypse. Because we already know that machines are taking over the world. They are. Every person in this room, I'm willing to bet, has a cell phone, and you don't even use it to call people. You use it to check your messages and check Facebook and check the weather, Google things. Machines are already such a huge part of our life. And my next statistic is just an estimate, so don't be too worried. But according to economist Brian Arthur, by the year 2025, 100 million jobs will be replaced by machines. That's only 10 years away. That is a huge threat to us as job seekers that no generation has ever dealt with on nearly as great a scale. We always knew we were competing with each other, but I don't think any of us really realized we were competing with robots. So, how do we beat the machines? Well, we already have some advantages that they don't. We have the ability to do things like this. We can think critically, we can be creative, we can talk and understand and persuade and change. The jobs that aren't taken by machines, the ones that machines won't ever take, are the ones that will be taken by us, students of liberal arts institutions. People who knew right off the bat that they needed to broaden their horizons, think differently, not because they were afraid of robots, but because they knew that's how you become a well-rounded human. Keeping with my theme of the apocalypse, I want to tell you all about a class that I took last spring. And this was my introductory course in international relations with Professor Laura C. And so this was a really great class overall, but our final project was this big team class-wide debate. And that right there is something that robots can't do. But the topic of the debate was what I thought was really iconic as a liberal arts discussion, and that was, how would your assigned country and school of thought respond to the threat of an imminent zombie invasion? How many people in the world have even thought about that on that kind of scale? I mean, probably, hopefully, the person who wrote the book we read, and maybe a couple really paranoid people at the Department of Defense. But other than them and us, not a lot of people. Definitely not enough people to program machines to figure that out for us. And this project, this combination of facts, theory, and just general silliness, really embodies what my experience has been so far at Colby. I told one of my friends about this project, a friend who goes to a big research university, and she just kind of looked at me like she felt bad for me. Like, oh, poor Alexa, her school is so silly. She's not learning the important things like I am. Well, condescending friend, I'd like to first say that I did in fact learn the important things. I know the material, I promise. I'd also like to point out that according to the National Association for Colleges and Employers, the facts are not the important things. The 5 most important things that a job candidate can have are, in order, the ability to work in a team, the ability to make decisions and solve problems, to plan, organize, and prioritize work, to communicate verbally, and to obtain and process information. All of those things we very much did. And I now feel perfectly confident going into any job interview and talking about how a liberal Kenya would respond to the zombie apocalypse. So, honestly, I'm not expecting the world to end, no apocalypses of any kind in the coming future, so I'm not trying to scare anybody. But I do know for certain that I have no idea what's going to happen in the future. And there's something really exciting about that. That means there's a lot of opportunities. But there's also something profoundly terrifying. Because how do you prepare for that uncertainty? Colby's job is to prepare us for the unknown. So how do they do that? Colby, you must teach us to learn. Of course, we know how to learn. That's how we got here. We're smart kids. But we need to now learn across the academic spectrum and beyond it. Teach us to think and to write and to speak. Teach us how to beat the machines, how to work with them, and how not to become one of them. Teach us the skills that will last us 10 careers, and teach us how to acquire new skills we can't even fathom we'll need for that job we take that might not yet exist. According to Forbes, the 3 things that millennials value most are happiness, having a purpose, and freedom. Colby, you have to give us the opportunity to find our passion, give us the tools we need to pursue it, and give us the strength to follow any path down which it might lead us. This is what we demand of you as a new generation of students, scholars, thinkers, creators, citizens, and I know that is what you can provide for us. Thank you.
Voting is now open. I sound like a machine, too. 4, 3, 2, 1, and voting is now closed. Our next speaker, Precious Hunt.
Now, I know that you know how hard it is for us to come up here and publicly speak in front of all of you, so let's give us all another hand. And while we're active, while we're getting our hands going, I want to ask people in here, just this one simple question. By raise of hands, how many married people are in the house? Y'all can shout, woo! Yes. And I did raise my hand because I am married. Yes, sir. All right. So now, depending on how long you've known your woman or your man, your partner, the person that you've been with for so long, you may think this was a while back, for some of us who've been married for more than 10 years, some of us maybe a year, such as myself. But I want to ask you, how did you first meet that person? How did you feel when you met that person? Where was your headspace when you met that person? Did you even expect for any of this to happen? For some of us, we didn't expect children to happen, but we'll go on. We'll move on. Well, if I were to personally have to answer this question, because yes, I am married to education. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I'd say no. I did not ever expect for me and my partner for more than 12 years, the person that I met when I was 2. I would have never guessed that I felt so strongly about ED, his initials, Ed, that we'd get hitched so quickly. I know you are dying to ask, why was this so unexpected? Because usually people have an idea after some time with their person, their lover, whatever you want to call it, your buddy, for some of us. As college students, we know the terminology. But I mean, this particular specimen just was not on my radar as a potential mate at the time. I mean, mathematics was my first love. Yes, it was. That was my first major when I came into college. Like, I thought I knew what I wanted to do. I did not. We had plenty in common. But education, my one and only, the apple of my eye, my husband, had something on mathematics that I still cannot put my finger on. I think education has always had a place in my life and heart, and a presence in my life that I simply needed to give it a chance. To be that something that could give me so much meaning in my life. Relating this to our topic, what should a liberal arts education aspire for its students? 2 words: sizzling hot passion and a longer than my arm span connectedness. Now, I know that was more than 2 words. But a liberal arts education should be concerned with sculpting individuals that understand their meaningful work. Not just the job, but the work that you will put into the world to make a difference. It is important that individuals receiving this education feel a responsibility not only to themselves, but to others, the people in this room, the person that you're tethered to right now that you're sitting by, to pursue their passions, to then be a positive, progressive influence on the world. Now, what thing? Somebody asked me what thing. That's right, someone asked me again, what thing? All right, thank you. I like participation. All right, if you want me to finish. All right. What thing? I'm so happy that you asked. That one thing that makes you have goosebumps every time you think about it. That one thing that you have to use all of your limbs to talk about it, to get your point across to people, that is so important to you, that you embody those ideals that you think are important. That thing, whatever that thing may be, you may want to change or simply improve in the world, something that you see. That thing is your meaningful work. and meaningful work is connected to your purpose. Let's try another activity. And we can do this to ourselves. Think of a time where you felt that you were successful. Now think of a time where you've done something meaningful. More than often, these two moments that people thought of were two distinctly different moments. This begs me to question, what is success? If it is not fulfilling your purpose, doing your meaningful work, or marking the world with your contribution to the collective is not considered success, I think we need to reevaluate what success is. Can I get a snap? All right, we can participate. Doing your meaningful work, no matter the scale of that work, it influences others because it is what you contribute and choose to put into the universe. Now, because we know about karma, the universe will respond back to what you contribute, and because we know the universe responds back, you've made a difference. Now, whether that difference has a stench so foul that people are repelled like bug repellent, or people are invited because you decided to put on your special cologne, that is totally up to you. Don't get me wrong, sometimes we have no smell. You know, sometimes when you pass gas. And no one notices because we didn't hear anything or smell anything. That does not change that you pass gas, and yes, you are excused. Okay. So what am I saying? I'm just saying a liberal arts education should bridge student pursuits of passions and their responsibility to contribute meaningfully to the collective. Just like I fell in love with education, everyone has that one thing that they just cannot shake. That irreplaceable desire to be the difference they want to see. The combination of passion and connectedness will help students succeed in making those differences and giving the world a reason to take another whiff of the atmosphere. Because our meaningful work has the potential for influence beyond ourselves, because our meaningful work is what tethers us together. Students being the Glade plugins in our world's outlets, releasing such the sweetest aroma of vanilla and maybe some flowers or lavender or whatever you prefer in your household, will be our outcome. Spread passion and develop purpose within our students. Give it a chance like I gave education a chance, and I guarantee that will be our outcome. Thank you.
Voting is open. Three, two, one, and voting is closed. Our final speaker this afternoon, Liam Connell.
I am just a cowboy, lonesome on the trail. The starry night, the campfire light, the coyotes call and the howling winds wail. So I ride out to the old sundown. Roll me over and turn me around, let me keep spinning till I hit the ground. That's not Noam Chomsky, that's a band called Thin Lizzy's Cowboy Song. I'm not actually a cowboy. I come from the north suburbs of Chicago. But Cowboy Song happens to be one that stuck with me even after I turned 13 and realized that they weren't the coolest band anymore. Thin Lizzy was a Dublin rock band from the 1970s, and the point I'm trying to make is how cool the idea of being a cowboy once was, for it to have been sung by a couple of Irishmen who at the time had never been to the United States. Western films make the same point. Everyone wanted to be a cowboy. But who was the cowboy exactly? Well, he was indeed fiercely independent, but He was also notorious historically for being violent, dirty, sexist, racist, even by the standards of the day, alcoholics. Take Butch Cassidy, for instance. He was a train robber. These guys weren't exactly Woody from Toy Story. But then what does it mean to be a cowboy today? For example, what does it mean to travel outside the US and be perceived as a cowboy? I'm sure no one expects me to carry a 6-shooter and say giddy up, but I do believe that they will have constructed a narrative that projects, among other things, the historical, literary, cinematic, mythologized cowboy. The narrative, that's where a liberal arts education comes in. Liberal arts education should strive to make students understand and control the narratives in their lives. The narratives include those that are projected upon us, as well as those that we project upon other people, upon ourselves, and the important events that happen in our lives. I believe that as humans, our relationship with the world is guided by narrative and analogy, and so an awareness of them puts us in control of our destinies. Recent events on campus regarding the Black Lives Matter protests and yik-yackers made a lot of us question what Colby really is as a community, and I'd like to present them as a few narratives. One is that of some anonymous person who is offended by the protests. His narrative was based on his experience in class, about 2 minutes of disruption and noise, and I'm guessing a perceived assault on his, I assume, whiteness by a sign that says Black Lives Matter. Another narrative was in the New York Times about a couple months ago during the Ferguson riots. It detailed, along with an illustrated map, the percentage of whites and blacks in each county around Ferguson by year. The narrative was clearly implied. Ferguson was a white community threatened by a growing black population. It's an interesting narrative to focus on the threat that a white community feels when there's such a striking other narrative. According to FBI data from 2012, Black Americans represent 13% of the US population, yet 50% of unarmed people who are killed by the police are black. So these two former narratives are really important to recognize because they distract from the truth, which can be expressed as yet another narrative. There's a community among us at Colby and among us in America. They're hurting and are calling upon us to make a change for the better. A good narrative like this doesn't limit its scope to one person and their ego reaction. And a good narrative forces us to make a decision. What side am I on? What can I do? Instead of what the New York Times article did by meandering off to a distracting topic. I really think the control of the narratives in our lives is important to all of us at a liberal arts college, not just for critical analysis of cowboy tropes and the understanding of world events around us. It's important for science majors. It's important for me. It lets me choose how I choose my friends. It lets me choose whether the enemies that I choose will be individuals or the evils in the world that I deem changeable. Racism, sexism, environmental recklessness. Narratives and analogies do not merely frame and guide our thinking, they're the very medium through which our thoughts and decisions come to be. There might come a time in a computer science major's career when she will decide whether to use machine learning technology to design the next big hookup app, or to design weed-recognizing tractors that will allow for revolutions in organic farming by expanding the production possibilities of pesticide-free farms. What would guide her but a narrative that she uses to perceive her own life and purpose in that life? Some questions will become vitally important in the coming years as we as a human race make decisions about the place of artificial intelligence in our lives and the tampering with of our own genome. Our science majors will have to distinguish between these narratives, both important and distracting when they inevitably make decisions for our species, and what better place to hone these skills than a liberal arts institution that puts them side by side with all disciplines on one hill. The question was, to what outcomes should a liberal arts education aspire for its students? I say, teach me how to find truth among ego-driven and distracting narratives. Teach me how to understand the world around me, and I'll figure out the outcome. Or, if you'd like, in the words of Thin Lizzy, it's okay, amigo, just let me go, riding with the rodeo.
Voting is open. 3, 2, 1, and voting is closed. So while I give Professor Bucklehide a moment to collate the scores, I want to offer another round of applause to not only our 6 finalists, but all participants. And thank all of you and all the members of Phi Beta Kappa who helped put this together, and if you'll give me a moment.
A brief word from our sponsors. On behalf of the Colby Liberal Arts Symposium, thank you for coming today. Thank you. It's been a wonderful morning so far with posters and presentations. We have an afternoon that is equally full of posters and presentations down in both Diamond and Parker Reed and Davis. You can look at your program to see what is happening exactly when. We did want to let you know a couple of things. We do have some dessert available down in the Diamond Atrium, so feel free to take advantage of that. But as you do so, do it respectfully because we do have sessions starting right at 1 o'clock. So be mindful of the noise as you enjoy the food there. But then please come back here at 4:15 this afternoon for top of the class, where what we're going to do is we're going to have a reception to celebrate. We're going to have some Maine-themed desserts. And I've heard rumors of some Maine ice cream with coffee poured over it that's supposed to be pretty darned terrific. We'll also hear from 4 students who are going to be giving super mini presentations of highlights of their work. So it'll be really terrific. Come back here at 4:15. And now I think Kevin's ready.
All right, and real-time results. Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you to all the organizers of class. So I'm now happy to first introduce our second runner-up, Alexa Busser. Our first runner-up, Liam Connell. And the winner of the 2015 Phi Beta Kappa class speech contest, Precious Hunt.